everyone's in front of a whiteboard or something. I'm in front of a gong. I don't have any magic numbers, but you're going to have to imagine the numbers. They're the same for everyone else. We're just waiting for three states. I mean, the vote's in, and this is the trickle down of democracy. The trickle down to democracy is working because there are some smaller races. I'll get into them in a second that are great news for Democrats, great news for Asian Americans. I'm going to talk about the Kenneth Mejia victory in LA in a second. But the big picture, if you want the big, and we need the big picture, right? We're not going to get the big picture. We're not going to find out exactly what's going to happen until at least, well, at the most, December 6th, because Georgia's going to a runoff. Raphael Warnock, the MLK Ebenezer Baptist Church minister, senator, has a thin lead over Herschel Walker, but you need 50%. So there's going to be a runoff December 6th. And that's when we'll find out about that race. But everyone's saying, well, wait a minute. Nevada and Arizona could, if it goes a certain way, it could help either the Democrats or the Republicans, and we don't even need Georgia, which would be, I mean, Georgia would still need Georgia, but it would solve a lot of problems and a lot of anxiety if Cortez Masto wins, the Democrat wins in Nevada. It's tight, though. Adam Laxalt has a 16,000 vote lead at this point, as I speak. And that's when, I think when I watched the polls, it was about 30 minutes ago. But there's about 120,000 votes yet to be counted. And a county I used to live in, Washoe County, Reno, is kind of seen as a swing state. And Cortez Masto is winning there, but razor thin, like 0.2% difference. So the big county, of course, is Clark County, where Las Vegas is. We've got 20,000 votes outstanding. If the Democrats win, that would solve a lot of problems. If the Republicans win, that could solve problems for them too, because then the key state becomes Arizona. And since Arizona is more likely to go Democrat, Cortez Masto winning in Nevada and then Kelly winning in Arizona could mean the Democrats don't have to sweat Georgia. The Georgians can sweat Georgia. Now, if the Republicans win both Nevada and Arizona, unlikely they'll win Arizona, because Masters is not doing well against Kelly, and the remaining ballots appear to be ballots cast in mostly Democratic strongholds around Phoenix and around Tucson. So the positive scenario would be the Democrats win both Nevada and Arizona. Georgia, not really relevant in terms of control of the Senate. But the Republicans can do it too. And that's what we're all waiting for. We're waiting for those final votes counted in Nevada, waiting for the final votes in Arizona, and then we'll be back to normal. But it seems like the key word is patience, right? Patience, we're talking about patience. In the meantime, and by the way, welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. I talk about the news, and the news is really the elections. We went into November 8th with all this anxiety about democracy, and thank goodness you all turned out to vote. I mean, it was a greater turnout than expected, at least for Democrats who avoided the normal thing that happens over the last previous Democratic administrations. They lost they lost their shirt essentially in the midterms. This, not so bad. Republicans did not emerge with a red wave, and the Democrats held. And a lot of people are sort of hang wringing about, oh, it's Trump. Trump saying, oh, it's not me. All right, that's kind of like off the main point about, okay, we still have to decide Democratic or decide control of the Senate. But in the little races, there were things worth talking about that aren't being talked about, and we're going to talk about them today. Number one, because this is the Asian American micro talk show, or the micro talk show for the AAPI and the AAXs, the Asian American Name Your Ethnicity. Asian American Chinese, well, that would be AACHs, the AACs. I'm an Asian American Filipino, an AAF. But there are little tidbits of good news sprinkled from within. Let me share one from the AAI, the Asian American, I call it the Asian American Indian community. I think under my naming convention, that's what we use. I don't know if anyone else would use that, but the number of Indian Americans elected to the 2023-24 Congress, five, five of them. And let's start off with Detroit. They elected Sri Thanadar. I hope I said his name right. Sri Thanadar. In Detroit, first Indian American to be in Congress from Michigan, and the first non black representative from Detroit in 70 years. Now, this is significant because, I mean, you're getting a version of this sort of historic sense now, 2022. Imagine when I was, you know, I mean, for previous generations, older generations. I mean, in 1982, we were mourning Vincent Chin in Detroit. And now in 2022, we are cheering Sri Thanadar, first Indian American to be in Congress to Michigan, first non black representative from Detroit in 70 years. That's historic. I mean, no other way to look at it. Let's see, he had 71% of the vote. He creamed Republican Martelli Bivings 24%. I mean, that's popularity. Four other Indian Americans already serving in Congress have won re-election. We have Ro Khanna. Look, I have to say I have a slight beef with Ro Khanna because he beat his Republican opponent 70 to 30% in District 17. His opponent was Ritesh Tandon. But, you know, I think, look, it's good that Ro Khanna is there. He's a progressive. He's good. I just didn't like the way he did it, how he sort of skipped the line. He didn't have patience. And he took the seat of Congressman Mike Honda, who was an acolyte of Norm Mineta, who held the seat before Mike Honda. Mike Honda was, I mean, you could say, well, what did Honda do? Well, he was there. He had seniority. And he had the influence and the ear of those in power. That's important. Ro Khanna has to, you know, he's had to develop his sense of who he is. It's taken some time. I think this is like his third term, fourth term. It's his fourth term after he won in 2016. And I think he's getting some steam. But now, where is he when the House looks to be turning into, you know, Republican majority? So I'm glad Ro Khanna won. But I just wanted to be open about some of my concerns about Ro Khanna. He's one of the 4 Indian Americans already serving in Congress. The other 3, Ami Bera, California's District 6. He won 56 to 44 over Tamika Hamilton, District 6, I think it's around north of Sacramento. In Illinois, Raja Krishnamurthy, projected to win the District 8 race in Illinois. He served in Congress since 2017. And then, with 60% of the precincts reporting, Pramila Jayapal, Washington's District 7. You kind of forget. They got to run every 2 years. Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Democratic Progressive Caucus, served since 2017. I mean, she's an important member. And she's projected to defeat Cliff Moon in Washington's District 7. But, it's not necessarily automatic that folks are in and then they, that's why you got to look at people like Barbara Lee in California's Alameda County, or even Nancy Pelosi for that matter. I think Lee's been there for 15 Congresses. Pelosi, 19. Every 2 years you run, and it's different every time, except for like I said, the stalwarts, like in California, in the Bay Area especially. If you get on, you win by 70%, 80% majorities all the time. I mean, Ami Berry won 56 to 44. Raja Krishnamurthy in Illinois, 56 to 44. Ro Khanna is getting there. He beat his opponent in California's District 17, 70 to 30. Anyway, this is the Congress. People end up falling in love with their congressman. And as the saying goes, I love my congressman, or I love my member of Congress. I hate everyone else's. That's usually what happens. So anyway, Sri Thanadar looks like he's going to be a stalwart out of Michigan, first Indian American to be in Congress from Michigan ever, and first non-black representative from Detroit in 70 years. And he's already won with 71% of the vote. Sri Thanadar, remember the name. Let's see how he does, right? Takes a while sometimes, and it's going to take a while if the Republicans hold and win the majority. It looks like they're heading that way. Less certain, certainly with the Senate. It still can go either way in the House. But that's why we're still counting ballots. To this day, we're still counting ballots. To this day. Oop, I got to play my sounder here. Emil, how can you not have your talk show implement ready? Of course. So we're still counting. We got the Indian Americans in there. Let me talk about that AALDEF exit poll. I talked about it a little bit yesterday. And I did my column today for the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Go to aaldef.org/blog. Basically, I just talk out my column. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be a red wave. And I was watching Republican Alan Fung, because when I first noticed him a couple weeks ago, he was dubbed by Fox as someone who could flip Rhode Island's decidedly blue congressional District 2. And I thought, okay, I wasn't the only one who said, I'm going to look at Alan Fung, District 2 in Rhode Island. That's going to be a bellwether of what's going to happen early. And of course, when he lost, I knew that some election day prognosticators would be confounded. Fung lost. So did another GOP hopeful who was really being touted, of course, by the GOP, but Hung Kao in Virginia had a shot to get a suburban Virginia seat. Nope, no hung cow. And that's because, look, America did not exit from democracy on Tuesday. That's the message now, right? Voters went to the polls and saved it. I mean, we had so much dread going in. We had so much dread, like, oh, and it was real. The dread was real. But thanks to many Asian Americans, thanks to many Americans, we know that they were voting, and we know what they feel like thanks to the AALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund exit poll, and I'll share some of their views. But I don't think Tuesday. Here's the thing that people are saying. I don't think Tuesday was that return to normalcy, quite like some people are saying. You know, where losers concede gracefully and we all work together. It's not that normal yet. I'd like it for be. I'd like it for it to be that normal, but it's not that normal yet. There's still some odious Trumpian sense out there. I mean, you can smell the Trumpiness because it was in the campaign right to the last day. I mean, yes, election deniers mostly lost on election day, but what I call the Jay Chen deniers won. Jay Chen, yeah. And for that, we must say, shame on you, Michelle Steele. Michelle Steele, shame on you. Make that Michelle Park Steele. That's her name when the Korean American isn't hiding behind her GOP operative husband's surname and wants to show her AAPI-ness. I guess that would be her appiness. Steele is going back to Congress representing California's District 45. But she did it by lying and slurring the good name of her Democratic opponent, Jay Chen. Steele used race twice in diabolical ways against Chen. First, she played the victim game by falsely claiming that Chen was making fun of her accent. He wasn't. But then, as the race tightened in October, Steele doctored ads to make it look like Chen had ties to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Chen. And that Chen was teaching propaganda in schools. This wasn't a red wave. This was like Michelle Steele's red splash of racist lies. And you got to call it out. I mean, because it gets like 10 seconds on CNN or some other national news outlets. But as an Asian American oriented program, we have to point this out. What Michelle Steele did to Jay Chen. Chen, a decorated Navy intelligence officer, a proud Asian American whose grandmother fled China for Taiwan, was being portrayed by Steele as a communist sympathizer, which he definitely is not. But Steele made that her doubly racist Asian on Asian weapon, pandering to her constituents in the Little Saigon part of Southern California's Orange County. And then she defiled. In doing so, she defiled Chen's good name. Now, Steele already had the white conservatives in Orange County. But there's nothing like a little racism to invoke generational trauma in the Vietnamese community. I mean, what else would you call it? Generational trauma. District 45 is a strange mix in Southern California, with the larger part in conservative Orange County, and that enabled Steele to win handily, 55% to 45%. That's not like the 70, 80, type victories in places that really love their congressperson. 55 to 45. That's how she won, district wide. But look deeper. A smaller part of the district is in LA County, Los Angeles County, which Democrat Chen won 53.9 to 46.1%. And that's what they call redistricting. You see, they were running in one district before they got changed to this new district. And if you want to know where things aren't rigged at the ballot box. Things are rigged when people start drawing up the lines and they start drawing up maps and the district lines. And it's not just in California, it's all over. It's all over the nation. New York, a battle going on there. So, with this redistricting effort in California's District 45, Steele already had a huge advantage over Chen. But then she was so insecure, she had to add a little racism to make sure. I mean, she must have figured she had lots of money pouring in from Kevin McCarthy's PAC, right? I mean, so why not, right? What's a small lie compared to the big lie? I mean, there is the big lie, and this is a relatively small lie. Oh, Jay Chen, communist sympathizer, a small lie. There's no difference. A lie's a lie. It's still despicable, and yet it's Steele who's going back to Congress after the racist lies in her campaign against a fellow Asian American. How can she be trusted as a worthy public servant? So you got the J. Chen denial by Michelle Steele. But now let's turn to AALDEF's Asian American exit poll. Election deniers among the Asians. And there are some. You say, well, we don't know. We can't tell. We just know the regular exit polls that, all the major mainstream networks show. I mean, this is the thing. An exit poll. What does an Asian American think? That's kind of a subtitle, one of the subtitles of this daily web show. What does an Asian American think? I mean, it's what people should want to know about us on all issues, great and small, because we're here. We won't be ignored, and yet we are ignored. But, I mean, you ask yourself, when does anyone ever highlight us in media exit polls? I mean, there's never a big enough sample to get a reliable sense of what we think when they think to think of us, which they never do, right? And then they say, oh, we don't have enough we didn't sample for Asians. So here's the AALDEF exit poll for the 2022 midterm elections. A multilingual, 11 languages, 11 Asian languages, including Tagalog for my Filipino listeners out there. It's a poll of 5,351 Asian American voters in 15 states. And I want to mention them because it's significant. DC, California, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Nevada, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Virginia. It's a lot of states. 15 states, 11 languages. And for me, the big news is, you want to know, well, how do Asian Americans vote, right? I mean, that's the big one. Roughly 2/3 of Asian American voters are Democrats, 1/3 Republican. And that was true for the House, Senate, and gubernatorial races. 2/3, more than 60%, with another 30% Republican. Democrats over Republicans. That's still, I mean, depending upon how you look at it, comfortable for the Democrats, somewhat moderating when you consider 33% Republican. But that is sort of how, I mean, if you have assumptions or you have feelings about the community, here's an exit poll that gives you data. But 2022 was not just about donkeys and elephants. This was an election about the fight between the election deniers and the defenders of our democracy. Just regular voters, the election deniers, right? They're the ones who say oh, Joe Biden isn't legitimate, versus the defenders of democracy who are just open minded voters who register, go to the polls, mark their ballots, and then answer AALDEF exit polls. So, when asked if the outcome of the 2020 presidential election was legitimate, and this was asked in D.C., Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Texas, and Virginia only. For some reason, not all the states had this question. 59.2% said yes, it was legitimate. The 2020 presidential election was legitimate. But 16.3% said no, putting those Asian Americans solidly among the election deniers. 24.5% said they didn't know. Maybe they're just being, equanimous, but not wanting to commit. That's natural. But that's pretty wide spread. 59.2% said yes, that was a legitimate election. 16.3%, a minority, said no. A minority of Asian Americans are election deniers. Remember that when you see your favorite election denier on television, or you hear people talking about election deniers. Asian Americans, we were pro-democracy. Now, compare those numbers with the national generic numbers in the CNN exit poll, where they asked the same question. 63% said it was a legitimate election, 2020. That's a little more than the 59.2%. But still, we're trending good, or well, the Asian Americans. A third said no. A third in that general poll. And only in our AALDEF exit poll, 16.3% said no. 16.3% were election deniers. So, by that standard, Asian Americans aren't election deniers. Here's more proof. They offered up a higher approval rating for Joe Biden, 45.3%, versus 31.4% disapproval. These are national numbers now. 23.3% said they didn't know, which, to be honest, I don't know, maybe they didn't get the translation that was required, at the ballot or at the polling place. They were just swing voters, right? So here are the other interesting things about this exit poll. They ask these other questions. People say this was a campaign that brought out voters for two things: democracy, save democracy, and abortion. Right? Those are the two top issues that people were seeing in their polling nationwide. Well, Asian Americans don't want to deny your right to an abortion, according to the AALDEF exit poll. When asked if they support access to legal abortion, 63.8% supported. 63.8% support. That surprised me. I didn't know it would be that high. 63.8. This is nationwide numbers. Asian Americans, 63.8% supported access to legal abortion. 15.8% didn't know. 20.4% were opposed. Abortion was ranked high in mainstream exit polls after inflation as a motivating factor to vote. But the AALDEF poll showed the top three factors influencing their House vote to be economy and jobs, 15%, healthcare, 14.5%, education, 13.1%. That's pretty standard. But when asked individually about abortion, you see the sentiment of Asian Americans. 63.8% supported access to legal abortion. Now, they used the exit poll question in California, where it was on the ballot in California. Also in Michigan, I believe, right? I mean, they passed it in California. I just think that when you think of pro-choice, you think of abortion, supporting access to legal abortion, you better think Asian American. They're supporters because, as you can all see on the reason, that influenced their vote, 14.5% said healthcare. Abortion is a healthcare issue. It just is. Now, exit polls are also famous for asking other extraneous yet relevant questions along the lines of, while you're here, let me ask you about. So, this is a decent question. When asked if one had been a victim of anti Asian harassment or violence in the past 2 years, what would you think? Who said yes? How many said no? I'll give you like 5 seconds. Ready? When asked if one had been a victim of anti Asian harassment or violence in the past 2 years, only 21.6% said yes. 78.4% said no. I mean, I think that this is a poll question and answer that the mainstream public should be interested in, right? When Stop AAPI Hate says 11,000 Asian Americans have been affected by all the scapegoating during the pandemic, transgressions of some kind of hate-filled transgression. 21.6% in this exit poll said yes, they had been harassed. Only 78.4% said no. So what does it mean? I think it means that non-voters maybe are more likely victims. That's one thing. Or maybe it could mean that the more you are a full participant in the system, the less likely you are to be a victim of anti-Asian harassment or violence. And maybe that's the real motivation, the motivation to vote, the motivation to say, hey, if you don't want to be a victim of that anti-Asian American hate, get involved. Get involved in the system. I mean, that an interpretation. I mean, the numbers are there. Only 21.6% said, yeah, I was a victim. 78.4% said no. Here was another question that I was glad was asked, and an answer that was surprising as well. It was on the question of trans rights. When AAPI voters were asked if they support laws to protect transgender people from discrimination, 65.2% supported. Yeah, we want laws to protect transgender people. That's a lot of support. 2/3. 20.9 said they didn't know. Only 14% were opposed. If you think that Asian Americans are homophobic, transphobic, LGBTQIA phobic, think again. 65.2% supported laws to protect transgender people from discrimination. And frankly, who would have known? The large number is a revelation for me with transgender members in my family. I'm glad the question was asked. This, I think, is more for the benefit of people who look at our community and say, trans Asians, I don't know. Here's data. Here's important data. Finally, there was support for teaching a unit of AAPI history in K-12 schools. 82.7% said yes, only 17.3% said no. And as I see it, that's important in an era when school boards are the new battlegrounds and the battle for inclusion or censure. I mean, students not being taught about history, not being taught about, I mean, I saw this the other day. They're not talking about sex education anymore. They're talking about sexual education. And that's like a phrasing that surprised me. I mean, what is sexual education? Isn't it just sex education? I mean, no one is teaching anyone to be a certain way. I mean, it's just Sex education has always been taught as a kind of health kind of education. But the right is like warning people about sexual education and about, uh, you know, critical race theory being taught. It's not, but they fear critical race theory is being taught in schools and all this. They're afraid of information and they'd rather put out their own misinformation. Look, the past is important, but so is the present because every Asian American first is history. And as I stated already in this show about Asian Americans, South Indian Americans out of Detroit, history is being made in this election. Here's one other point of history. Kenneth Mejia. Now, my Los Angeles friends have been telling me about Kenneth Mejia for some time. He's just 34, Filipino American, CPA, allied with progressive labor movements. He won for Los Angeles City Controller. He's the guy who signs the checks. Mejia beat a veteran, termed out LA City Council member, and he won convincingly by a landslide. 23 points. He's the first CPA as city controller, first Filipino elected official in LA, first AAPI citywide elected official, first person of color as city controller in over 100 years. I think that's, you know, I wondered about that first AAPI citywide elected official. I mean, Mike Wu, wasn't Mike Wu? I don't know. This is taken from Kenneth Mejia's tweet. But they were excited. They had reason to be excited. I was talking to a white LA progressive yesterday, just a normal conversation. I said, "Hey, did you vote for Mejia?" He said, "Mejia." He was crazy about Mejia. And judging from how progressives were winning for city council in LA, it appears as if in the most populous Asian American city, in the most Asian American state, there's something happening there in LA. Not to inadvertently quote Buffalo Springfield, but a coalition driven by labor gaining traction in LA, and Mejia appears to be a beneficiary. He's outspoken, so outspoken he's had to delete some tweets he's done in the past. But he's an accountant. Maybe he's one of those rare fiscal progressives. I don't know. I just think that if you're an Asian American political watcher, look, San Francisco, my heart's in NoCal, but all this stuff is happening in SoCal. And I think Kenneth Mejia is a Paul, a new generation Paul, who's evolving and emerging, someone to watch out for in a good way for the future. Now, interesting to note, I didn't, in the reading I didn't see that Mejia got the endorsement of Filipino American Paul of the Hour, Rob Bonta, who was appointed California Attorney General and was leading in his race to be the elected California Attorney General. I don't know. I suspect Mejia was considered maybe too extreme for the generally progressive Bonta, but at least for now. Mejia is young. I just think there are two names right there, Bonta and Mejia, that if you're Filipino American and you're looking for a bright spot, those two names are the bright spots in 2022. So, on the national scene, we may have averted disaster with a rousing win for democracy, right? People showed up to vote. It's still unclear what's going to happen because we're counting votes. The Senate could be wrapped up in a couple of days, maybe by Saturday or maybe by next week. And if Nevada and Arizona aren't, then we'll have to wait for Georgia in December. So, the national picture, we're still walking with gingerly, I guess. What is the term? We're not done yet. A little patience. But these local races I've been talking about, or these regional races, help define November 8th too. Michelle Steele, shameful disappointment. Was Trumpism rebuked on election day? Not totally. Steele's Asian Trumpism, where the ends justify the means, disgustingly dishonest. And yet, she still won. She shouldn't have. There are also negative things that were observed by the AALDEF poll watchers, such as missing interpreters and poll workers asking for identification. Shouldn't have happened. But poll watchers observed these things. It's got to get better. But we take hope from the emergence of young polls like Mejia and an understanding of what Asian Americans are thinking as they exit the polls. Asian Americans are engaged, involved, and those are definitely positive signs in our democracy. So that's the AALDEF exit polls, the national figures. Now, they did some breakouts for two key states. Nevada, let me take Nevada first, because Cortez Masto, the Democrat, is neck and neck with Adam Laxalt, and at least when it comes to votes for the Senate, the exit poll said Asian Americans were 66.9% Democrat, 25.6% Republican, 6.9% other, and 0.6% did not vote. I'd have to say, based on that exit poll data, that Asian Americans, if Cortez Masto prevails in Nevada in the vote for Senate, Asian Americans would have significantly helped her. And here's an explanation behind that vote for Senate. The Joe Biden approval rating in Nevada among Asian Americans, 61.4%. Only 27% disapproved. And that other key factor, the support for access to legal abortion, 42% support, a little lower than the national number. 39.5% of Nevadans, Asian Americans in Nevada, say they support or say they oppose access to legal abortion. Now that's kind of surprising. A more conservative Asian American community in Nevada, and yet they are fully, not fully, but 61.4% approving of Joe Biden, which is about 20 points higher than most approval ratings for Joe Biden. That is according to the AALDEF poll in Nevada. The other state that's still in play in the Senate, December 6th runoff, is Georgia. The vote for the Senate, Asian Americans, 60.1% voted Democrat for the race for the Senate, 33.3% Republican, 4.6% other, 2.2% did not vote. This again, the AALDEF exit poll in Georgia, the vote for Senate, 60% Democrat, 33% Republican. If Warnock wins, that's the degree to which Asian American support is helping put Warnock slightly ahead now. He doesn't have 50%, but in the runoff, it gives you hope on December 6th that Asian Americans are there for Raphael Warnock. On those two other national questions, Joe Biden approval. This is interesting for how Asian Americans are different from state to state. The Joe Biden approval number in national sense was something like 44%. So I go back to my page here. 45% was the approval rate nationally. Just for Georgia, it was less than that. It was more in line with the national generic number. 37.9% was Joe Biden's approval rating in Georgia. 36% disapprove. And this is typical for Asian Americans. 26% say, I don't know. They're going to swing. But that's surprising in Georgia. 37.9% of Asian Americans in Georgia said in this AALDEF exit poll, that was all the approval they were going to give Joe Biden. Not the 60 that we've seen nationwide, not the 44 that the generic exit polling is given by 30 less in Georgia, 37.9%. And that's really the interesting look at some of these state by state. Oh, let's go two more. You know, a lot's been made of Ron DeSantis. I am not a big, Ron DeSantis does not float my vote. And for Asian Americans, only 54.6% Democrat, 34.7% Republican in the vote for governor. So I guess they were Chris voters. Joe Biden approval rating, higher than normal. This is in Florida, 50.4% to 26.8% disapproval rating. And then the support for legal abortion, 53.7% say they support, which is sort of a little lower, but still in keeping of a very positive support for legal abortion by Asian Americans in Florida. 29.3% opposed. And let's see, that's Florida. Okay, one more because Gretchen Whitmer won. And a lot of people are now talking about her as, oh, well, she could be president. Maybe, right? There's people talking that way. So for governor, 78.2% of Asian Americans were Whitmer voters. Voted Democrat, 78.2, 16.6% Republican. There was no question. It was all Democrat. The Joe Biden approval rating, a little bit closer to the national number, the national generic number. Asian Americans, remember, were like 45%, which is in keeping with the generic number. In Michigan, it was 49.5% approved, 22.4% disapproved. And the final big category, support access to legal abortion. Well, if you're voting for Whitmer, what do you think? 66.5% support access to legal abortion in Michigan, 22.7% opposed. And this is for Asian Americans in an exit poll that AALDEF did on November 8th. They had all their volunteers out there. They had, and this is incredible. You need to go over this data again, just sometimes as reminders, because as I said, the other polls don't have enough Asian Americans to tell us anything about anything. So you got to when someone, in this case AALDEF, when they take the time to do this, it's no small feat. 5,351 Asian American voters are in this sampling, a nonpartisan, multilingual exit poll done on November 8th, and it's something. And I think especially now, because you really want to take that temperature. You really want to take the sense of where Asian Americans are now, because you got 3.3 million Asian American voters, fastest growing racial ethnic group in the electorate. And we're seeing that maybe they can be the difference. They might be able to be the difference in Georgia. I mean, especially as I read off that number, the vote for Senate in this exit poll was 60.1% Democrat, 33.3% Republican. That could be something that would help Raphael Warnock in the runoff, December 6th, if everyone shows up to vote. We cross our fingers. We hope. We hope. We hope. So, this is it's fascinating. All the data that we get, and we're still waiting. We're still counting, or not we, but they're counting in Arizona, Maricopa County, Pima County's Tucson, Maricopa County's Phoenix. That race should go to Kelly because he has a slim lead, and the areas that I mentioned are primarily Democrat. The other race that's up for grabs is the gubernatorial race in Arizona, where Katie Hobbs, last time I checked, had like a 13,000 vote lead, which is very, very slim. And there's still a lot of votes to count. And Carrie Lake is scary because she is an election denier, and who knows what she would do if she were in power. Would she even certify an election that doesn't go her way? I mean, that's the problem with election deniers. That's why we're watching 2022 in particular, because in general, it looks like, because there was no red wave, because the blues held up better than anyone expected. That's a victory. That's a victory. So, yesterday, Joe Biden went before the nation and gave his assessment. And what got me was how he was talking a lot more about class than about race. He was conscious about how, even in the Asian American polls, right, the Asian American exit poll, economy and jobs tended to be number one. I mean, some states were different. So, it was between economy and jobs, healthcare and education. And sometimes economy and jobs and healthcare switched. Like in Georgia, it switched. Healthcare was number one. But basically, it was economy and jobs. And yesterday at the press conference, that's what Biden talked about a lot. He talked about, because it's all linked with inflation, it's all linked with the potential for tax cuts and who would get the tax cuts. Here's a clip that I think was kind of interesting. Here's Joe Biden. So he's going after the corporates there. He said, pay your fair share if you want to be a multimillionaire. Don't be like those 55 corporations in 2000 that made 40 billion and didn't pay a dime in federal taxes. Because Joe Biden would say, now that's important for him to say, because that was a a real, you know, when you reach a certain age, those issues are important. When I was 20 years younger, I said, oh, Medicare, Social Security. But if you're younger and you see your parents getting older, I mean, that was one of the things about Alan Fung, the Republican from Rhode Island, who talked about his mother on Social Security and Medicare. Oh, what happens if he has to support Ron Johnson? He's going to be a maverick Republican. So thank goodness Joe Biden spelled it out. He says, that's not on the table. Don't worry about it. He says, I won't do that. So he said he's gonna veto any attempt to pass a national ban on abortion. But this is the olive branch, right? This is Joe Biden's olive branch to Republicans because he may not have the House. He's hoping to have the Senate, but he may not have the House. So he's saying, let's work together. No kidding. We want to like read the comic strips in the newspaper for once instead of like just dwelling on what's the latest. Now, you must admit it's better now than it was when what did Trump do today? What I mean, you don't go what did Biden do today? Because Biden is steady Eddie. So none of this constant political battle. And that's Joe Biden speaking yesterday. You may not have heard the full quote in in the sound bites that they play, because you'll get the sound bites on in other news shows, but I like to go beyond and like give you the full context of what he's saying. He didn't really talk about race. He talked about class. He talked about the middle class. Keeping with that, I mean, everyone is talking about the economy. Everyone is talking about inflation, but generally speaking, the economy is not as bad as people think. I mean, there's some bad signs. Inflation is bad. But then, there's contradictions. How do the unemployment rate is low. So you got to raise the unemployment rate to make things better, which doesn't make sense. But that's what the economists are saying. I'm just saying that what I say my inflation fighter to people is if you really want to fight inflation, go vegan. Because if you go vegan, well, there dairy out, meat out, eggs out, all the in the food basket, that's like 20-30% increases, you know, and then walk. There goes your gas bill. Or, I know sometimes that, oh, how do you walk in the suburbs, Emil? Okay, all right. That's a tough one. Go electric. I haven't solved that, but it's funny. because when I was on the East Coast recently, boy, they're paying hardly anything for gas. They're saying, "Oh, we pay $3.99." Is that it? I mean, here I am in California paying like I don't know. Remember the last time I bought gas? I don't drive as much, but anyway, look, it's all important. But I think we're in better hands today than we were leading up to the election. We still got a lot to get over. Let's wait. Let's see. Meditation next. So, I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific live. We talk about the news. Check out the replay on amok.com. 2 p.m. Pacific live because it just seems like a good time. Yesterday I went live at 7 o'clock. I don't know. And then, this is show 428. 427, not so bad. Some of the others last week were good. Right? We replay them. We may be replaying more. Check them out on amok.com. You can catch them live. If you catch them live, you can, if you want, you can. Oh, people didn't hear Biden. Oh, well, Biden was good. I don't know why it's not coming across on my soundboard. So sorry about that, folks. Joe Biden. He said, it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. We just need to remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. Nothing beyond our capacity. Now that's Joe Biden. Look, at least he didn't mention inflection point. He said, look, and he says, we're at an inflection point. I'm in an inflection point of my show right now. I'm about to wind down, and I'm told that you didn't hear the Biden thing. I hope you heard the Biden thing. Anyway, catch it on the replay, amok.com. All right. Meditation. Loving self-kindness. It's the go-to. The other thing is, it's not like I said things were back to normal where you concede and people are in a loving embrace. We're in the same team. There's still a little bitterness. I mean, and Michelle Steele shows that Asian Trumpism exists. It's real. Shouldn't, but it's real. And what would be, I guess I was a bit judgmental. But the thing is, the voters decided and they put her through. And ultimately, they will have the last word because they will decide if she's doing a good job and if she should stay. So I don't have to be too judgmental. But I have to be judgmental enough. I have to say, call out what she did, because what she did to Jay Chen is no less than what you'd call stop AAPI hate and say, hey, look, this person said this about, oh, it was another Asian American? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's in another category. That's in the congressional category now. Because, it's not, see, that's the thing. It's not that only Asian Americans, they're transgressors are non-Asian Americans. They can be Asian Americans too. And that's where we are when it comes to Jay Chen or Michelle Steele and Jay Chen. So really, I would like to see us all come together and work together. We're still working it out. It's going to take some time, but we're in a better direction. Still, the go-to is the loving kindness meditation, where we look to each other. And the challenge is we don't always get there, but we look at the people we don't like and we try. We try to offer that sense of love, a sense of love. Because, before you can offer that self love, that self care, that love for yourself, it's always a better idea to offer to others first. Because that's where you're going to find the true benefit as it is returned to you. So, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific. Live. Till then. Mahal Kita.